What's up, guys? It's KB. Make sure you subscribe to the Underground Sports Philadelphia YouTube channel. Click the bell icon down below so you don't miss a single video from us. And thanks for tuning in to another video from Underground Sports Philadelphia. Now let's get into it.
Philadelphia, baby, you're gonna love it. Best sports fans in the world. Actually, the worst, but that's what makes them the best.
Welcome back to Top Bins, the show bringing you all the action from England and Italy, the Premier League, and Serie A. I am your host, Matt, joined by my downtrodden, my low beat, my low energy, sleepy Dom. Dom, how are you?
Sleepy Dom. That's what we're going with today. Love that. Well, wasn't all meant to be today, I guess, but it's all right. I'm doing all right.
You're very convincing. I think you're doing great. That's the vibe I'm picking up on here, is that you're doing really well. Just a great day, great weather, all the good stuff that you want.
Yeah. My girls' lacrosse team is winning some games. The weather's been great.
The
I'm
games that
doing well
you
at
can
the
influence are
gym.
going well, is what I'm hearing. The things that you can control are going well, which is an
Yeah.
important perspective to keep here.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point.
So let's start in England, shall we? Because we had a big weekend and midweek for the relegation fight in England, which has, of course, been a hot topic for us for the last few weeks, really a few months, honestly. A lot of the teams in the relegation zone, obviously, with some really important games. Every game for the rest of the season is going to be crucial. We had this one, Everton scoring 5 against Brighton away from home. No one had this down as a potential result. I think you picked Everton to have 1 point for the rest of the season, so they've already outperformed your expectation at least. But I think most people would not have expected them to go down to Brighton, especially considering how good Brighton have been this season, and put up a result like that. Everton were free flowing in this game. They were counterattacking. They were doing dummy runs, stuff that I just have frankly never seen. I have been a Dwight McNeil fan, and it was the best Dwight McNeil performance I've ever seen in my life. And that's saying something, because I watch him with rose tinted glasses quite a bit. It was an unbelievable performance by Everton, which doesn't guarantee them safety, but dramatically improves their odds at being in the Premier League next season.
Yeah, I mean, they've got City next, but at that same point, Leicester plays Liverpool and Leeds plays Newcastle. So I doubt that Everton finds itself at the end of next weekend, or at the end of this weekend, excuse me, but in the relegation zone. I think they're safe for at least a week. We'll see what happens if all teams drop points, or if one of the teams gets a cheeky draw or a cheeky 3 points. But yeah, credit to Everton playing some free-flowing football. Maybe they were feeling themselves, you know what I mean? They're playing one of those teams that is up at the top, the upper third of the table. However, they've been in some questionable form. A couple losses in their last 5, but hey, credit to them. Law of averages said that a win was due at some point, though, right?
Yeah, I think that's how it works. I think 98% of people who stop gambling, really miss their big payout. If you just stuck around long enough, you would have won those $1 million.
I don't think how that works. I don't think that's how it works, man.
I think that's what the law of large numbers mean.
I haven't been to a Gamblers Anonymous meeting yet, but I think that's.
Well, Tom, to be fair, I think between the two of us, math, I think that trends towards me. I think I get math a little more than you do, my friend.
That's a low blow right there. Damn.
I think I know a little math. Everton do play Man City this weekend, like you said. Listen, Man City have an eye on next Wednesday, Champions League Semifinal, all to play for. Maybe
Yeah, but
this is Arsenal.
Even when they
right
rotate their squad, they're still a top 5 team in the league.
Barely rotate their squad, and they barely make subs. It's the biggest myth in the world that Pep rotates his full squad and
But if he needs to, this is what I'm saying. If he needs to, they're still a good team.
He doesn't, because he's a psycho. He made no subs against Madrid. He barely makes subs. It's the biggest myth in the world that he's it's just unbelievable. This is Arsenal fan speak, by the way. You can convince yourself.
Sorry.
You could convince yourself, if you're an Arsenal fan, that City, they got this Champions League semifinal to look forward to. Maybe Everton are up for it a little bit. They could save their season with the win. And I just want to tell every Arsenal fan who's thinking that, you're wrong for thinking that. Everton will not help you. They will lay down like meek little sheep and allow themselves to be rolled over by Manchester City. That is what they've done historically.
Sure.
So
when you don't have a European competition to worry about, and your direct competition in the table does, you can normally bank on the drop in form for the team that's still in the Champions League. Why? Because they're focused on those midweek games. City, it doesn't fucking matter. It really doesn't. Excuse my language, but it really doesn't matter. Like, it really does not matter.
I'd like to tell you you're wrong, but I don't know that you are, to be honest. I think you're pretty spot on there.
Wow, you called. That's 2 weeks in a row. It's 2 weeks in a row now. He's said on air.
Go back to every show we've done, and I've complimented you on something you got right in every show. All right. Speaking of rolling over against City, although it wasn't quite the rollover job that I think everyone expected, Leeds lose 2-1 in Manchester. Sam Allardyce's first game in charge. They had at least a chance at getting a point out of this game. They were not able to do so. Hung around, I think, a little better than people expected them to. Erling Haaland somehow did not score in this game despite some very, very fine chances. Leeds, though, it's nice. It's nice moral not destruction, at least. Like they don't walk away from this game, I think, really downtrodden. Definitely the hardest game remaining on their schedule, at least, is out of the way. And it didn't hurt them goal differential-wise, which could become a potential, matter of importance, depending on who they're sort of end up fighting it out in the last spot for relegation for. But they certainly still have the hardest schedule remaining of all the teams in the relegation zones, just about. In fact, I was looking at the Opta stats for who has the hardest schedule. We did this for the Serie A top 4 race. The hardest schedules remaining, the top 4 in the Premier League by their PowerPoint ranking system. Aston Villa, Leicester City, Brentford, and Leeds. Those are the 4 teams with the hardest remaining schedule, with Nottingham Forest rounding out the top 5, actually. So 3 teams in the relegation fight have the hardest schedule remaining, which is, I think, really reflective when you look at them on paper. They're very challenging. Everton are sort of middle of the road. The 3 easiest, in case anyone's curious, Crystal Palace on paper, and by this point system, has the easiest schedule remaining. Liverpool have the 2nd easiest, and West Ham have the 3rd easiest. So those are your teams that have the hardest and the easiest sort of run-ins now to the rest of the season. Liverpool, obviously chasing potential.
Reds making a push for Europe.
I mean, Christ, it would just be an absolute miracle if they find their way in the top 4. It really would. But for the relegation zone, Leeds have a very challenging schedule. I think they weren't unlucky to not pick anything up in Manchester, but I do think they avoid a huge loss, and they can at least rest on the fact that they hung around in the game against a very challenging opponent. And Big Sam, I think, will be trying to navigate them out of this dead zone that they have found themselves in, but I don't have a lot of faith.
Nope.
Nottingham Forest, they hung on to beat Southampton. Again, Southampton are not mathematically relegated, but they are spiritually and emotionally relegated. They're certainly down, and that loss really cemented their place. It's really about pretty much if they're just going to be finishing absolute bottom of the table or not, but they are almost certainly finishing bottom of the table, and they're almost certainly down in the championship next year. But for Nottingham Forest, it's a big win. It's a big win, by the way, off the back of a man named Morgan Gibbs-White, who transferred to Nottingham Forest. He's had a big hand in the success of Nottingham Forest over the last few weeks. He's had quite a few goals, and his turn of form, I think, is potentially going to be what saves them from getting relegated, which is hilarious because when you think of the fact that they bought, 28 players over the past 10 months, one of them finally is paying off for them and making a real difference. He is what I think people were pretending that Jesse Lingard, which, by the way, I think people have forgotten Jesse Lingard is on Nottingham Forest. Remember when he signed his 1-year deal and everyone was making it out like he was going to be this huge influence on the team, and he isn't. And
he doesn't even start.
Right, because he's also competing. Again, it's impossible to to really put into context just how many new players Nottingham Forest signed and just what an insane strategy that was, and that it might pay off for them. but who knows? But it is a big win, and we highlighted this was going to be their best opportunity at getting 3 points for the rest of the season. This was their best opportunity. Their schedule is still pretty challenging. They have Chelsea, Arsenal, and Crystal Palace on the final day. Obviously, Chelsea are not what they typically are, but Arsenal are going to still probably be chasing the title in the penultimate game of the season. So they there's no guarantees really. There's no true 6-pointers remaining. There's no team that you think, you're not going to be playing anyone lower than you in the table for the rest of the season if you're Nottingham Forest.
Well, it's very interesting, Nottingham Forest. The way that this team is built now, they've got a decent balance of like some good like younger players who are kind of like on the fringe, a couple of them of like being more serious players for the Premier League. Morgan Gibbs-White, best example of that. But then they also have these like established guys from around the world that played in different top leagues that, have top flight like experience, such as like Renan Lodi. Like he was, splitting time at Atletico Madrid. Nia Kate was playing in the Bundesliga. Felipe, another Atletico Madrid player. Serge Aurier, who has been around the Premier League and has started for Tottenham for a long time. Keylor Navas in net. You know what I mean? Like you have these good, strong veteran presence, and then you have a nice young supporting cast. And I mean, Morgan Gibbs-White is a great talent. That assist he got, that little cheeky little back heel. Whew. Just beautiful thing of beauty. Hey, your boy Taiwo got a brace in this game as well.
He absolutely just big boyed it for his second goal. Just getting manhandled by a defender and just whips a very nice volley. I like seeing him perform well. He's someone that kind of always wish had maybe worked out in Liverpool. Someone that I kind of like sneakily followed his career when he was at Union Berlin, hoping maybe we'd bring him back as a change of pace kind of striker, but it's just doesn't really seem like he was ever going to fit our system. But someone I'm very happy to see find some success, find the back of the net. Good for him. Good for Nottingham Forest. We'll see. Again, they won a game that they had to win, and that is a good thing. Yeah. That is impressive, and it could very well save their season. Leicester, they got boat raced by Fulham. Really, really tough game here. And again, when you're just talking about challenging schedules remaining, all of these teams have them. And not that Fulham are walkovers, of course, but Fulham are probably the easiest team remaining on their schedule. They have Liverpool, Newcastle, and West Ham on the final day. Sort of a toss-up, I guess, between Fulham and West Ham, but no easy games there, no gimmies, no 6-pointers, where at least if you get a positive result in that game, they had opportunities to really separate themselves from some of these bottom teams. They had successive draws against Leeds and Everton. That was the opportunity for them to really push themselves out of this bad position at the bottom of the table, but they've just not been able to do it. They had a win against Wolves a few weeks ago, but before that, their most recent win was in early February against Tottenham. So this is a team that has just been in terrible form really for the last 2.5, 3 months, and has not been able to find any sort of consistency. And I really do fear for them. I think it's definitely plausible that this team could be going down, because I'm not sure where the savior is coming from for them.
Well, for as much as we talked about Nottingham Forest's strategy of signing a lot of players and hoping it works, there has been really no radical change in this Leicester lineup for like the last few seasons. You're still seeing the same old guard, everywhere on the pitch. Yes, Harvey Barnes has kind of been like one of the main guys the last season and a half maybe or so. Like he's the guy that's kind of like burst into the scene with Leicester, but like you still got Jamie Vardy, James Maddison, Tielemans, Castagne, like all of these guys, even the bench, Ndidi, Patson Daka was signed this season, or was he was there last year, right? Yeah. So there are a few signings, but nothing that really like pushes the needle for them. So I'm worried about them. Like I really do think that relegation really is threatening for them, and if that happens, they're gonna have to blow it up, right, and start from scratch. It's already looking like that. You wonder why teams like Fulham are doing well. They make big signings. They bring people in. They brought Palhinha in. They brought Willian in, and people laughed at that signing, and look how it's worked out for Fulham. Like, he's played well in a few games. I mean, he had 2 goals in this game. So they signed these players. They brought in Vinicius from Tottenham. These guys, the teams that make the right signings, even teams that just decide to sign whoever and whatever, right? Like, they're having more success, in my opinion, than a team like this, where they're not doing anything to truly improve the squad. And I know this, like, guys, listen, I'm a fan of a team that does this shit. Like, they don't want to sign anybody. You're complacent with the squad for a couple years and try to save money and bring that money up. And look what happens. You don't succeed. In the rare instance that you do, because you have a fucking world-class player on your team, you may have a little bit of success for a season. This is what happens. I really do think that Leicester are going down. You cannot convince me otherwise.
I do think you hit on two important things here, is that squad refreshment is very important. You're seeing that with Liverpool this year. They really neglected that midfield over the last 2-3 windows, and it came back to bite them this year when they were hoping to really kick on and perform higher. You're seeing that with Chelsea. They probably could have done with a squad refresh. You're seeing the positive aspects of that with Arsenal, right? They refreshed the squad 2-3 years ago. Got a lot of like old deadwood players out, players that they were not effective for them. Made some youth signings, promoted youth players, like made a few big signings like Thomas Partey. They bring back Odegaard, right? Like they bring in Gabriel Jesus this season and Zinchenko. Like they make the big signings, after refreshing their squad, and it revitalizes the team. I will say the problem for Leicester, and it's the same for Everton, which is the other point of this, is that they can't make signings because they've made bad decisions over the last 4 or 5 years financially. Yep. And it put them in a really, really tough situation where they couldn't sign people, where they have a bad wage structure. They were making pretty average signings and paying them well above average price. That the wage system at Leicester got really messed up over the last few seasons, and they were sort of directionless. And I think that's a part to blame here too for both those teams, because I think you can say the same thing you said about Leicester, where it's kind of the same squad that they've had over the last 3-4 seasons. A few changes here and there, but largely the same core. Without a lot of growth, without a lot of development, and without a lot of fresh faces and new blood, that does lead to you stagnating. It's a common story, a common thread, especially in the Premier League, around leagues all over, where you have these teams at the bottom that are sort of getting by, but that maybe overspend or don't spend in the right ways. You make 1 or 2 bad signings, one big bad, a few bad financial decisions, and all of a sudden, you're in a bad spot, and it takes a long time to sort yourself out. It can take 2 or 3 years, and in those 2 or 3 years, you can get relegated.
And I mean, for all like the contracts that certain players are on, where there's bad financial decisions in the spending, it's the passing on selling of certain players. They've held on to Tielemans for way too long. Like, this guy has been touted as one of the best younger talents in the midfield in Europe, and big teams have come calling. There were all these rumors about him going to Manchester United for the longest time. Why did they never go through with it? Right? Why did they never try to push that forward and get some money back into the club? You have to sell a big promising player like that. You keep them for too long, and now they're past their selling point. Like Jamie Vardy, he's not going to sell for what he was going to sell for in the middle of the 2010s. Even James Maddison, this isn't 2017, 2018, where he probably could have went to a bigger, top table Premier League club, and they could have got some money for him. You make those types of mistakes and you pass on selling these players, and what's going to happen? I mean, in the Serie A, we've seen that with Napoli every now and then, and we've seen it with Lazio. They're 2 owners of clubs that don't ever want to sell players, but they've scouted, and Lazio is kind of in the middle of that change, and we already know how it worked out for Napoli. So I just have a question. You mentioned Chelsea in when you were talking about teams that stay stagnant and don't sign players, or were you just talking about in general of bad financial decisions? Because Chelsea signed a lot of high-profile guys, but like they're on the precipice of being in this situation because of all the contracts they've been giving their players.
To me, it was both as well, because I didn't think before this past year that they had properly addressed that midfield for a very long time. And
that I do agree
still
with.
somehow have spent $600 million, and they have not properly. They
Yes,
still need
I
like
agree
almost
with
a
that.
whole new midfield. Like outside of Enzo Fernandez, like I don't know who was going for with them. Kovacic, his future is really unclear with the club, and he's getting a little older and is a little more injury prone. And N'Golo Kante is like a quarter of the player that he used to be. It's the best kept secret, I think, over the last 2 or 3 seasons. He's not been close to his levels.
People don't want to have that type of conversation, man.
Well, because everyone I can't say that word. Infantilizes him. It's really weird and creepy how everyone pretends like he's like a 7-year-old. It's exhausting. It's exhausting.
Yeah, people still think like he's a young player. It's crazy.
So annoying. But yeah, I think Chelsea needed a refresh for a long time. They tried a refresh. I have no clue. They're like
It's
a
the
rich
Bowley
Nottingham
effect, man.
Forest, where they just bought like 15 players that they really didn't need, and now they're just kind of stuck with them and signed them all to 8-year contracts. I have no clue what the future.
I don't understand how you have a guy like Kai Havertz on your team and then you go out and sign Felix.
Probably because Kai Havertz can't score a goddamn goal.
Neither can Felix really, and he's coming
Felix
off the
scored
bench
over the
half
weekend
time.
at least.
He did coming
Felix
off the bench,
looks
which is
more
promising.
like
but
a regular striker than Kai Havertz. I mean, Felix will go back to Atletico Madrid this summer because he's there on loan, and we'll see what his future looks like. No one's paying whatever it is, 120 million that Atletico is going to want for him likely, but Christ above. I mean, Chelsea is just in such a strange position.
They've got Raheem Sterling, they've got Havertz, they've got Aubameyang. They still struggle to score goals. They brought all these players in, and look what happens. What did happen? I don't get it. I love it, but I don't. I love
the downfall. I just am mystified by all of it still.
Yeah.
That's the honest truth. So, shall we, Dom? Shall we move to Italy? Getting closer to a subject that you don't want to talk about. At least Milan had a good game.
No, let's talk about the league. We can talk about the league. That's cool. That's cool because Milan just came in and went to work against Lazio. They were very comfortable. Like it was a very solid win against that Lazio club. They had Milinkovic Savic chasing everybody. Luis Alberto didn't look like his normal self. Like they won the midfield battle to the point where it was like, hey, we're gonna easily beat the second place team because we need the points and we need to get into the UEFA Champions League spots. Although it was kind of concerning that Rafael Leao went down with an injury. Tough times for Milan ahead, but I was happy to get this win.
It was, I think, the Rafael Leao injury, because it came like 10 minutes into the game as well, and it was a big concern, and obviously, not to jump ahead, but I think was a factor into today's result as well.
100%
in the Champions League, not having Rafael Leao, but you had that great Teo Hernandez goal, just one of the best individual goals you'll see anywhere around. Just
shades of last season too.
Yeah, it's not the first time we've seen him do that. Picks it up, goes probably like 90 yards, coast to coast, if this was a basketball play. Just not often you see someone have all that it takes to do something like that. So it's a big win for Milan, obviously, in the league, though, because like we've talked about, you have this just constant like dessert case of rotating plates in SerieA, of teams fighting it out for the top 4. So it's a big win in that sense because it moves them obviously a little closer, and it's against a top 4 rival too. It moves them within striking distance of Lazio, who are feeling probably a little comfortable in their position near the top of the table. But that was not, of course, the only big clash we had in Italy over the weekend, because we also had Inter just outworking Roma, and Roma just some caged bad decision making. Lukaku's goal comes out of just a terrible decision by Ibanez, intercepted by Lautaro, who just lays it in easily for a in-form Romelu Lukaku, who's turned it up over the last few weeks of the season now, and is starting to look a little bit more like his old self. Big win for Inter, of course, because again, they're keeping pace, and they find themselves now in 4th place. They had been on the outside looking in over the last few weeks, and have had a little bit of a good run of form now. 4 straight wins in the league. For Roma, it has just been a bad last few weeks. injuries have really piled up on them. You know, I don't want to make too many excuses because I think still you can execute better on the field than they have over the last few weeks. But probably the most snake bitten team in Serie A this season out of like the bigger clubs, and I think very frustrating for Roma fans.
So you kind of already answered the question I'm gonna ask, but did you see what like Mourinho said, where he was like, you know, if we didn't have a European competition to worry about, then, you know, we'd be second in the league right now, basically. Like, basically saying, you know, because of, you know, the fact that we're worried about these midweek games and stuff like this, he said, you know, and considering, you know, Roma doesn't really have squad depth to rotate squads, he said, like, oh, you know, you see, I don't know if he mentioned City or Real Madrid. He mentioned one of them, but he was like, they brought in so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so off the bench. And I've got like these 3 guys that nobody knows about. Like, do you really think that, you know, Roma would be doing better if they didn't have European competition? I mean, Inter's worried about European competition as well, and they go out and did their business, you know? So, do you think that played a part?
I do think it does play some part. It's impossible to say. Like, I think it's unreasonable to say that playing in like a European semifinal has no influence at all on your decision making at the weekend. And again, especially when they've had the injuries that they've had, and the suspensions that they've had, like they've just they've hit a bad run of form at a bad time of the season. And it worries me, too, that could carry over into tomorrow, you know, when they have a big Europa League semifinal, which could be their best path to Champions League and, you know, could be another sort of notch in the belt of Jose Mourinho for talking about, you know, one of the best managers of all time. It has sparked, I think, over the last few weeks, a lot of discussion about Jose Mourinho's future. PSG has apparently been interested in Jose Mourinho. There's a lot of smoke there.
I actually just saw that today for the first time, so I was like, "Whoa!"
You've had Thiago Motta linked to the Roma job. He's had a pretty good season at Bologna as manager. You know, and that might be an interesting step up. I think there could be a very interesting manager carousel this summer because you've heard weird stuff about Spalletti as well at Napoli. There could be, you know, I know their sporting directors linked to Juventus, and I've heard weird stuff about Spalletti potentially being out at Napoli as well, depending on how interseasons go. We've already heard about Inzaghi, like, thinking about just resigning. It's interesting to think about maybe if he'll be back. I think
Pioli out.
The only coach that I feel positive in the top 7 of Italy right now that'll be back is Maurizio Sarri. He's the only one that I feel pretty confident is going to be back at his job next year. Gasperini probably, but
yeah, that's what I was going to say.
He though, like there was a little bit of friction over the last few years with Gasperini.
I mean, but there's always rumors for him like taking that next step up to a big club, you know, and it never happens. He's kind of just like stayed with Atalanta and like showed that loyalty. I don't ever see him leaving.
I mean, I see him leaving, but I just think I think Maurizio Sarri is the only one I would like bet on, you know, like being there next season. So
yeah, Pioli out for sure. But listen, I used to be an apologist. I changed my mind.
Juventus, speaking of Gasperini, see off Atalanta, kind of stopped them in their tracks. They'd been on a really good run of form, which had seen them kind of re-enter the European place discussion. They'd won 3 straight until running into Juventus. Juventus with an interesting game as well. You had some debuts here. This has been the story, I think, of Juventus this season, which we've highlighted at multiple points, is that you've seen youth players getting chances with this team, which has just not been the norm.
Very un-Allegri-like.
Yeah, you had Samuel Elling Jr. come on and score. It was his full debut for Juventus. Had a great goal. Dusan Vlahovic scores a beautiful goal to kind of cap it off. He was apparently subjected to racist abuse by some Atalanta supporters, ultras. So some smackdown coming in the term of suspensions for some of those fans that were doing that. You hate to see that kind of stuff because it just doesn't belong in sports, obviously. But on the night, on the field, of course, Juventus do get all 3 points. their appeal, the appeal process is continuing with them. This is just going to be a kind of background fabric for the rest of the year, I think, with Juventus and pretty much all of Italy and all of the top teams pushing for European spots, because what happens with their appeal process, what happens with any points deduction, whether that's for this season and for next season, it's going to be really important, and I think it's going to shape up really the way we view the rest of this year, because I think we all just want clarity on this situation. I think Juventus wants clarity on this situation. I think Milan, Atalanta, Roma, Inter really want clarity on this situation, and to know kind of what they have to be competing for, what opportunities they have in front of them. We're obviously hoping on some swift justice that probably isn't coming, anytime soon.
And listen, I want it reduced from 15 to 9. That's still enough to get Milan back into a UCL spot. So, hell, even if it's 6, let's make Juve play a little bit of catch up. Come on now, let them be punished finally, right? They had a decade of shady dominance in the league. Let's find something out, please. And
I don't think anyone who supports a club that was run by Silvio Berlusconi can ever look from any moral.
Hey. Listen, he just gave the money. Galani was the man that called the shots. All right.
Okay, you keep telling yourself that.
Listen. I'm not saying that sometimes maybe Silvio had to sit in a room with a very burly man behind him to kind of maybe convince some players to sign. But
Let's move to the other end of the table, because we finally had some movement in the relegation spots in Serie A. We've been tracking this because Hellas Verona, despite having a terrible start to the season, being around like the bottom place of Serie A, like we had Salernitana in years past, have found their way out of the relegation zone. They get a big win over the weekend, and Spezia lose, and we find ourselves now with Hellas Verona leapfrogging them. They are on 30 points. They are technically safe right now, sitting in 17, 3-point advantage over Spezia. It was a win over Lecce too, which is obviously important because they gained some ground there. They could, it was kind of a true 6-pointer at the bottom of the table at this time of year. And so, we've talked obviously a lot about the English relegation race because you have so many more teams sort of involved. But, in Italy, you do have something similar. I think Lecce, Hellas Verona, Spezia, Cremonese seem out of it despite a win over the weekend. But, stranger things have happened. Sampdoria are down. They're mathematically relegated. They have had a tremendously bad season. And so I am curious to see what their future holds. But, Lecce, Hellas Verona, Spezia, all to play for in the final weeks. And it's not like, they don't have, they have a very interesting schedule. Lecce still play Lazio this weekend. They still have Spezia to play. That is going to be a massive matchup.
It's a massive game.
At the end of the table there in Italy, because, again, when you're talking about 6-pointers, when you're talking about the opportunity to, leapfrog some teams. Hellas Verona don't have the easiest end of schedule. They have Torino this weekend, then Atalanta, Empoli, and finish with Milan on the final day. Both of those teams could really probably are going to need a result on that final day. For Verona, it could obviously be for their future in Serie A, and for Milan, it could be their future in, say, the Champions League or the Europa League. So that is a big thing to keep an eye on. Let's take a look at Spezia's fixtures as well to close out the season. They have Milan, obviously, this weekend, then Lecce, like we said, Torino, and Roma on the final day. Again, Spezia and Hellas Verona both having really, really vital matchups on the final day. Cremonese have Juventus, Bologna, Lazio, Salernitana. They're going to have to win at least 2 out of 4 to have a sniff, to have a shot at a...
It's funny because Cremonese has a way of stealing points off of teams all the time. They can steal points from the top clubs and then get wins against the clubs that are kind of in their area of the table. So I wouldn't count them out for potentially making a push. Lecce's in some bad form. They could fall.
They would have Cremonese. The problem with Cremonese is they are on 24 points. And I think you have Spezia at 27, and then Verona and Lecce. Verona has 30, Lecce has 31. So they have to win 2 and maybe a draw and hope that, Hellas Verona, just kind of loses out and Lecce maybe lose out. They need help. It is not in their control, which is
I don't
the
see
tough
Lecce
part.
getting points in 3 of their last 4 games. I really don't.
It is a tough schedule to close out the year with Lazio, Spezia, Monza, and Bologna. That is not an easy.
I don't even know if they could get all 3 points against Spezia. To be honest with you,
that is the big game. That is a win for safety if you're Lecce. I think you're not even really thinking about Lazio this weekend. You're thinking all about Spezia because if you win there, you put yourself at 34 points. You're safe and you're good. That is definitely where their eyes are going to be. So. Relegation spots heating up a little bit in Italy. Looking forward to that playing out. Let's get to the Champions League, Dom.
No, let's not.
Well, we'll dip our toes in the water here. We'll start easy. We'll start with the interesting game, the intrigue of Manchester City versus Real Madrid, a 1-1 draw, a game of screamers as it was between Vinicius and Kevin De Bruyne, 2 players that have had a lot of success over the last few years. Vinicius Jr., of course, won the Champions League for Real Madrid last year and, plays a big part in potentially getting them back to the final. I do think this is a result that Manchester City is fine with. I think they're fine with taking 1-1 back to Manchester. Typically, the bad times for them have come away from home in the second leg. So the fact that they have it at home, they have the opportunity now to maybe get that result and, they had an advantage going into the second leg last year. They had a 4-3 advantage, and it didn't work out for them. So we'll see how a 1-1 draw does for them this time around. I didn't think it was the most impressive game by either team. It was a very typical, if you have watched Real Madrid in the Champions League over the last 9 years, this is what they've done. But especially in the recent iterations of Madrid, where they just have a tendency to, they're a little bit like a boxer that just kind of hangs around and fights, and is always going to go to a decision or is always going to get a late knockout. They're very rarely knocked down and out. They don't ever take big contact. They're always just escaping with glancing blows and sort of living to fight another day. That has just been the way that they've won the Champions League over the last few years. So it was interesting to see that play out with a City team that is so ball dominant and has looked so good recently. I think City were a little frustrated at times in this game.
It's a very odd lineup too. What Pep is doing, a 3-2-4-1 with Stones as a midfielder, is very.
That has been his new obsession, is John Stones in midfield, because you signed Calvin Phillips, who, by the way, I would just like to say, I was wrong about Erling Haaland, and I wasn't even really wrong about Erling Haaland. I was not right about Calvin Phillips. I had no clue what the hell they were doing signing him. He did not strike me as a City midfielder. Have I been vindicated? It is too early to say. But that man has not touched grass this year.
And meanwhile, Pep is doing this all while not subbing a player off. And they still, draw with Real Madrid, who put in 3 subs. They set up in their normal 4-3-3, a very structured formation with all these players playing in the formation, where they're supposed to be playing, aside from maybe Camavinga, but according to FootMob, he was the man of the match. He had the highest rating. I mean, he's been flourishing at left back since he's been put there by Ancelotti. So, Real Madrid just have, this formation. They have this team, and it just works. And they go out there, and somehow they always tend to get results. City had to come back a little bit, right? I didn't watch the game. Ancelotti got a yellow card.
Yeah, he was also complaining that he shouldn't have received a yellow card, that's only reserved for players, and he had some issues. There was a little bit of contentious action too, where the ball technically did go out of play for City, in the build up to City's goal, but I didn't think it was in the same phase of play. But it wasn't reviewed for some reason. I don't know. It was he definitely had his issues with the game. I would say it was a weirdly officiated game. By the way, Calvin Phillips. 151 total minutes this season. He's played in 8 games in the Premier League, 3 games in the Champions League. So
I would agree though with your initial sentiment where you said Manchester City was probably frustrated a bit this game. I mean, they had more possession, even though it was very even, 56-44. They had 10 shots, no real big chances. They passed better than Real Madrid did. They had almost the same amount of corners. They had more shots on target. they played well. However, 0.55 expected goals. They played better in the first half. They had a higher XG in the first half than the second half. It sounds like a City game, and somehow they only get a goal. They still had the majority of the possession barely, and control the game and control the tempo. It seems like they lock in, and Vinicius ends up getting a goal first, to put them down, and they have to play catch up.
Yeah, well, Vinicius' goal too came kind of a bolt out of the blue, which is just what he's capable of.
Mm-hmm.
Comes off of transition. It was an absolutely beautiful strike, of course. I think too, Camavinga's position is interesting too, because he's been deployed at left back, not even just for Madrid, but for France as well. Because he does give you, he's quick, but he's also a pretty good defender, and he's great at progressing the ball. That was definitely a skill of his coming into Madrid, and having, like we talked about Teo Hernandez, right? Having someone that can kind of take it 60, 70 yards and progress the play is really key on that side of the field, and it gives you a lot of question marks too, because he's obviously able to cover really well for Vinicius, and also offer support to anyone in the midfield, kind of rotating on that side, whether that's Modric or Cruz or Valverde. Like, no matter what, it's a very interesting kind of niche that he's been able to fit for them. And for Manchester City, I think, like I said, they'll probably be a little frustrated, but ultimately, not a bad result for them. 1-1 away in Champions League is even in the days of the away goal rule. It was a very good.
It's a big result. Yeah.
But even now is still a pretty nice result. Dom, let's just rip the Band-Aid off. Come on.
Can I say one last thing before we move
delaying.
on? No, I'm not. I'm actually not delaying. We talk about Pep and City, and the way that he has his team playing, and it's always, ball dominant, control the play, pass around, pick the right pass and find your teammate. Real Madrid is built for the proper play style to counter that, which is play on the counter attack. They're very solid defensively. I mean, they have one of the best, back four in the world. They have Modric, who still is no slouch defensively. He's a good box to box, and you have Valverde, who is obviously their ball winner in the midfield. And Cruz is kind of that like Pirlo role, where he gets the ball deep, finds and picks the passes. Vinicius and Rodrigo are very fast. And if you can't get the long ball or play it through or into their feet, you've got Benzema checking inside, kind of, playing that striker, but more of like a false nine at times. And they're just built to counterattack. And it's provided us with an electric tie so far. And the second half of this tie is looking real tasty.
Yeah, I am looking forward to seeing it, and looking forward to seeing who makes it into the final here, because it feels a lot to play for still in the second tie.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much in our other semifinal, unfortunately. Inter, it seemed like it could have gotten a lot worse. Inter go 2-0 up very quickly against Milan. It is a stunning result. It simultaneously felt like it could have been so much worse for Milan, while also feeling like they let a lot of chances go. And probably, I can think of that Tonali strike that went off the post. That could have been a real opportunity for them to at least maybe get 2-1, maybe find a late equal tie, but it doesn't happen, right? But Inter also had chances to really, really put them out of this tie, and they did not take them. It's still there to play for. Like, you could tell me Milan could win 2-0 and send this to extra time next week. I think that is a doable thing for them. A lot of that is going to depend on Rafa Leao's health, and I think you definitely could see that he was a main man for them that was missing tonight. You also had Bennett get injured quickly into this game too. Like, it just, some bad times to get those two injuries, I think, for Milan, of course.
I mean, one of the best things that was an adjustment that Pioli has done was move Bennett to that number 10 role, because not only is he a good player that can dribble and pick a pass out and set his teammates up, but he offers a nice bit of pressing work there too, because he does have a knack to get into a tackle. Him coming off injured and Brahim going in there is Brahim isn't no slouch for a number 10, but he doesn't offer the same type of pressing work in the center of the field that Benacer does. And then on top of that, they said it in the broadcast. You kind of just mentioned it as well. Not having Rafael, a lot of it helps interroute because they know they don't have to worry about that threat down the left side, so they can focus more on the center of the field because that's where all the chances are going to come from. You're not going to get all those chances from Salamakers. You're definitely not going to get good quality chances from Junior Macias all the time. I mean, God forbid the Uber Eats driver decides to actually get a shot on goal instead of thinking he's prime Robin. It's friggin' ridiculous. I mean, they were just, Calabria's marking on the first goal. What the hell is he doing?
Well, I don't know why Calabria is getting matched up with Edin Dzeko. To me is
I'm so confused why, Simon Kier's on Lautaro, who can jump, but you can get away with having Calabria on him, and it should have been switched. I don't get it. I saw that Tomori was on Dumfries, so that makes sense. I get that one, but if this wasn't zonal marking, I don't understand why that was the matchup. He got manhandled. And then he loses out on his position. Dzeko's goal, incredible. I have to give him credit for that. To be able to have the frame of mind to get a physical advantage and just get your foot in the right spot and put it in the back of the net. That was top tier.
If you asked me to describe an Edin Dzeko goal, it would look something like
exactly
that.
Like that.
It would look something like that.
And he's been doing it for years in the Serie A, so I'm not surprised, right? There's some issues right now, tactically with Milan going on. Krunic is not the guy you need in a double pivot.
Should have not been on the field. Should have
gotten
a red card. I have no clue how he escapes a red card late in this game, and that again could have maybe shifted next week's balance a little bit more. But I do think Milan had their chances. You had that Macias opportunity off that lovely threaded pass but that's probably shouldn't have been on the pitch, right? If it he was not a starter for a reason, and that's been a problem with Macias too, is that he's not a consistent performer. He's not someone you want in that situation. He's honestly, of everyone on the field, excluding defenders, probably the last person you want taking that shot.
I guarantee you, if Salamakers was on the right hand side, there would have been a better chance, because at least he could have hit it also with his right foot, across his body. Macias is never going to do that. He's always going to cut back in on his left. He's always going to try to curl it. It's literally, he did it again. I mentioned prime Robin. He did exactly that. He took on his defender into a double and tried to curl it far post, and he just didn't get the right contact on it. The Salamakers offers a little bit more. They could have brought Origi in instead and played him on the left for most of the game, because he looked more electric in his minutes on the field than anybody else did on that left-hand side. And I don't get some of the decisions that they're making. You need somebody to link up with Teo on that left side, because if not, it makes it way too easy to stop Teo's runs. And even Tonali isn't innocent of anything, because honestly, the only reason that Mkhitaryan got his shot off for his goal was because Tonali decided not to hustle back. And you can see him scan the field and see Mkhitaryan making the run, and he doesn't try to sprint. He still stays at that same pace that he was running, and just hoping that they didn't make that pass.
It's tough.
I don't get it. And didn't I say this too? Didn't I say this? Inter always seemed to play with a chip on their shoulder recently against Milan when in games that matter. I know that you mentioned, that Milan have had the upper hand in most of these games. And yes, they were mainly league games. But when you're talking about the Copa, 3-0 Inter. When you're talking about this semifinal, 2-0 Inter, right? When these games matter in high pressure situations, Milan just folds. It's terrible. Çalhanoğlu always seems to have the game of his life against him. That shot, I'm surprised it didn't go in.
The one that rattled the bar, that would have been a backbreaker. And I think if that goal goes in, we're talking about a 4 or 5-0 game. I think.
Yeah.
I think Milan. Listen, here's the thing. I know it's doom and gloom right now. 2-0 is a recoverable position. 2-0 is
it's the worst lead in football.
Right. I don't know if it transfers over games, but I do think it is a recoverable position for Milan. They cannot play the way they did today to get there, and hopefully Rafael will be fit to play. That's really the most important thing. If they play like they did against Lazio, they have an opportunity, right? We've seen this Milan team be good and play well. The problem is we haven't seen them really do that lately. They've been in a little bit of turbulence over the last few weeks. Outside of like the Napoli results, they really haven't had anything. And even the Napoli games, I actually think it's interesting the way that Pioli approaches, because I think they really win those games off of good defensive structure. And I did not see that today. I mean, instantly they crumbled. From the first minute, it felt like the advantage was not with them at all.
Yeah, like Calabria goes from keeping Kvaratskhelia in his pocket for a week, an entire week, 3 games, and then gets worked by not just Dzeko on that goal, but DiMarco the whole game. And I mentioned DiMarco a couple of weeks ago. Like, he's the X factor. He's their Teo Hernandez. And what happens? He gets an assist today because he's always just up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And then he has a powerful as hell left foot, and he can score goals if he wants to. He can set people up if he wants to. And Milan need to figure it out on that right-hand side defensively more than offensively right now, because if you're getting cooked all game like that, it's something to worry about.
The back post runs by Inter's fullbacks have been a problem for a lot of teams over the last few seasons. It's whether it's DiMarco or Dumfries. Still lots to play for, though. It is not over. It is, like I said, it's not an irretrievable type of result. But let's look at the results and the fixtures for this weekend. Let's not forget, too, of course, we have Europa League and Europa Conference League action tomorrow. Juventus for Sevilla in the semifinal for the Europa League, and Roma Leverkusen on the other side of the bracket. And then Fiorentina versus Basel in the Europa Conference League, and West Ham versus AZ Alkmaar or AZ Alkmaar. I'll give my European friends the Z on this one.
The Z.
Some good games there. Friday, the weekend kicks off with Lazio versus Lecce. We talked about the importance of that game for both those teams, really, to be honest. But in terms of big blockbusters, not quite what we got from last weekend, but still some good ones in there. Inter versus Sassuolo, a good one, of course. Milan looked to rebound against Spezia, and Spezia really could use a positive result. So not an easy game by any means for Milan. Aston Villa versus Tottenham. A game for European placements on tap in the Premier League. Manchester United versus Wolves. Manchester United trying to lock up their top 4 spot. That is always going to be crucial for them. You got Arsenal versus Brighton on Sunday. That's a good one. Arsenal obviously trying to keep in the title race, keep it alive to the last day. That is what they're hoping for. They play after Manchester City in the morning against Everton, so they'll have an idea, if they have a chance at maybe making up some ground. In Italy, you've got Fiorentina versus Udinese, a good one there. Bologna versus Roma. Roma are going to definitely need a result there. And then on Monday, you've got Leicester versus Liverpool in the Premier League, like we mentioned, a big one. And then we'll be back with the, Inter versus Milan on Tuesday, Real Madrid versus City on Wednesday. When we're back next week, we will know what our Champions League final looks like. We will know who'll be playing for it. I know it's a bummer, but you know what? Hey. This time next week, we'd be having a great time. We could be previewing a Manchester City versus Milan final, a Real Madrid versus Milan final. That could be a lot of fun. It ain't over.
Yeah, everybody's singing Marotta's praises right now. That's what I was reading on Twitter this afternoon.
They won't be
he got them back to the
semi. Financially insolvent this summer, so.
Yeah, it's kind of funny seeing Inter play without a shirt sponsor on the front too. Like, yeah, they got the eBay on the sleeve, but it's a joke. It's a joke, man. It's crazy. Like,
cope. I smell cope.
I popped my copium pills right before we played, right before we got on the air, man. Crazy.
You're putting on a brave face, and I respect you for it. It's not easy to come on here after a tough loss and talk about it. So, good for you. You have my respect. You had my respect before, but you got my respect still. You didn't lose.
Sweet.
Dom, I will see you next week. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, under better circumstances, at least on your end, maybe we'll pop a little champagne, have a fun time. But until then, keep it locked, keep it loaded. That's my new saying, I think. I don't know why I keep saying it. Nothing to do with the sport or my personality or my personhood. But we will see you next week. See ya.